New markets news, the shares were mostly low on Monday in Asia, with South Korea's benchmark down 2.3%. The political situation remained tense in South Korea as local media reported that the police were considering imposing an overseas travel ban on President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon's status remains uncertain after he declared martial law last week in the midst of a budget dispute and then reversed that hours later. Chinese shares also fell. Hong Kong's Hang Seng down 0.6%. The Shanghai Composite Index also fell to 0.4%. And investors are awaiting a major economic planning meeting that is expected this week and will see policy agenda for the coming months, possibly bringing a fresh stimulus for the world's number 2 economy. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq notched more record closing highs on Friday, with jobs data fueling expectations that the Federal Reserve would cut interest rates later this month. The non-farm payroll report shows U.S. employers hired more workers than expected last month, but also showed that the unemployment rate unexpectedly ticked up to 4.2% from 4.1%. The S&P 500 climbed 0.2%. The Nasdaq Composite rose 0.8%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 0.3%. The JSE was higher in mid-morning trade. The rand is currently firm on dollar weakness and gains in precious metals like gold. The rand is currently trading at 17 rands 87 to the US dollar, at 22 rands 83 to the British pound, and at 18 rands 89 to the euro. Gold is trading at $2,653, while platinum is at $955 per ounce, and the price of Brent crude oil is currently standing at $72.95 a barrel. Gary Boyson is the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss, and he is our market analyst for today. Gary, always a pleasure speaking to you here on Point. Thank you so much for your time. This week going to be quite a data heavy on the local in front. We're expecting so much data, but among that data is inflation figures and retail sales. Can we expect a cooling of inflation to continue, or maybe it will bottom out? And how is that likely to affect the MPC decision when it is made in January?
So having a look at it, we had an incredibly low headline inflation reading last time around. So inflation coming in at 2.8%, and that number did have some statistical base effects in it as well. So I would expect, I don't think we're going to get there. I would expect a mild positive lift to inflation there. And again, it really is the story between headline inflation and core inflation. Remember, headline inflation includes very, very volatile numbers like energy and food prices, and if you strip that out and have a look at the core number, our inflation picture is not quite as benign as that 2.8% would lead us to believe. So last time around, our print was at around 3.9%. I think core might be flat, but I do think that headline number is going to lift a little bit.
Yeah. On the same day, we're also expecting retail sales from Stats SA for October. Do you think we're likely to see the impact of the early withdrawals of those 2 pot coming through in this number?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you there's many gauges of consumer sentiment and the consumer health in South Africa. I mean, we're looking at things like Black Friday specials. Now, this is going to be the October number, of course, but our retail sales have been fairly strong, and it's difficult to pinpoint exactly why that is. We've had a little bit of relief in terms of lower interest rates, but certainly that 2-pot money starting to play a role in it. So so far we've had 7 months of expansion in retail sales. These, as I said, will be October figures. It'll be great to see an 8th month, and while it's not going to include the Black Friday numbers, which we'll get the following month, retail sales in South Africa have been strong, and it does seem to be some light for consumers. Yeah,
Gary, I see that the rand is back to being firmer at around 17 rands 88 to the dollar. Would this be on dollar weakness, or how can we read this current strength?
It's also a difficult one to get all the disparate facts and try and find the exact underlying driver. And I think some of it is certainly the dollar weakness. So if you look at the dollar index at the moment, that's only down around 0.2%, while the rand is almost 1.3% stronger. So there's almost a geared effect to that dollar. Now, the dollar index obviously tracks the US's major developed trading partners, but it does seem like emerging markets are getting a little bit of a lift. So as you said in the top of the show, gold price up around 1.1% today, and that's looking at that's certainly helping from a commodity point of view. We're seeing on the local market, the resource index really is leading the upside today, up around 2.6%, and that's being driven by the likes of Harmony up 3.76%. We've got Goldfields up more than 3%. Sibanye also looking very strong. So the South African currency is always very, very linked to what happens in the commodity space. And I think with a little bit of a lift that we've seen in commodity prices today, that's feeding into our local market as well. And it really is the resource index driving it. And I think that is where the optimism is coming from around the South African rand.
Right. I was looking at Sense earlier on, and I saw that there wasn't much to go on, but Transaction Capital and their trading statement definitely caught my attention. They were due to release their results today, but that has been delayed, and they're expecting some continuing sizable losses, and it looks like they want to prepare certain notes for annual financial statements. Take me through how you see Transactional Capital and their losses, and maybe you can educate us just a little bit about what would be happening behind the scenes of a company when they now need to restate certain things before they can give the notice on Sense, for instance.
Yeah, so remember, Transactional Capital has been through an incredibly difficult year. There's been a lot of moving parts in their financials, so I feel a little bit sorry for the accounting department at Transactional Capital. And essentially, as part of JSE rules, they did have to restate their trading statement. So we did have a trading statement out, I believe it was on the 28th of November. Yeah. That gave us an update. It was most of this information was in there, but some of those ranges have just moved slightly. This trading statement today has narrowed some of those ranges, so it is surprising to see that the stock is down over 4% on the day. But remember, this is the stock that unbundled We Buy Cars this year. It's sold off discontinued operations and a lot of non-core assets as well, and will essentially be rebranding as Nutrien. So Transaction Capital as a company, as a listed company anyway, is to an extent coming to the end of its life, and it's in the process of a very complex turnaround strategy. They've refinanced, obviously through the sale of non-core assets, a lot of their businesses. It's looking like it's in a lot better space, but Transaction Capital, as we know it, which was the entry point into SA Taxi, essentially won't exist in a couple of years' time, and we'll have a new listed company in Nutrien that focuses on business process outsourcing. So yeah, it's a difficult set of results, and I think they did say that their results are ready. It's just kind of regulatory hurdles that they've got to release this trading statement first, and I'm sure we'll see their full year results to September in the next couple of days.
Right, Gary, I don't have a lot of time, but I'm really keen to hear your quick view on the survival of President Yoon Suk Yeol surviving an impeachment vote over the weekend. So many moving pieces out there in South Korea. How do you read what's been happening and where everything seems to be heading to, with threats of him being investigated for treason and abuse of power, etc.?
No, so if you look at the history of presidents in South Korea, and you go all the way back into the 40s, you'll see that the political system in Korea is almost very unstable. It's actually unusual for a president to exit in an orderly fashion. I mean, they've had presidents assassinated, impeached, presidents that have committed suicide. It really is a very checkered past for presidents in South Korea. I was reading Goldman Sachs report on it. They do say that the base case at the moment is that there is going to be an orderly exit, but there's a lot of fear that there is essentially a power vacuum at the top. We saw reports that he stepped back from a lot of his daily duties, although he is still the president. So you get a sense of who is currently in charge of South Korea. Now, we're seeing that obviously in the weakening of the won as well. We're seeing the index, the Kospi, also down around 2.78% this morning. But then this really is, I suppose, a continuing trend. So from around early July, the Kospi's down almost 20%. So I think markets may have anticipated a lot of this. There's also a lot of speculation that the selling in Kospi stocks is really retail focused. They're seeing the headlines, they're reacting to it, but the institutional money is looking at the discounts in some of these Korean stocks and actually sitting tight. So yes, it's an interesting place to invest, and you never know, maybe an opportunity when there's chaos in a political system. Often you do get the best bargains as well.
Absolutely. Gary, thank you so much for your time. I've been speaking to Gary Boyson. He's the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss, and he was our market analyst for today.